All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our weekly interview and performance series. And if you've been watching this for a while, you probably recognize this guest, but he's a tremendous musician and composer and arranger, and it's always a pleasure having him here. This is the great David Marriott. And David, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
And we're excited to have David today because not only we're going to play some new music and have a lovely interview as always, but I always enjoy talking with David because the conversation just goes on and on and on and on. It just goes one direction to the next. But we've talked about for a while, and we're going to be starting a series on arranging for all different types of ensembles and sizes and things. And David is a brilliant arranger. And so we're going to just kind of be talking about that. We haven't even, mostly me, but we're both insanely busy all the time. Like trying to connect is just crazy. But, we're supposed to figure out like a title for the series, which I haven't. But we're going to get it started because it needs to happen. So today is just the conversation about getting that happening. And so feel free. We're going to do the interview as usual for about 45 minutes. And then open things up for questions. So this is kind of meant as an open forum. And in particular, as we move forward, we'll be doing one of these a month, and it's going to focus on arranging and different elements of arranging. So kind of like an open workshop. So please feel free to ask questions, even if you want to just jump in right now and start asking questions, both for David and myself. So anyways, so David, last time we were here, we talked about you and your background, and if you missed that, that's also on our YouTube channel. You can check that out later. But can you talk a little bit about how you got started arranging and when that started taking shape for you?
Yeah. This is actually a fun story. It's not one I get to tell very often. I think I was in junior high, and I was just starting to get interested in who was arranging what. Right, and every year Hal Leonard would put out a flexible record in those days,
Really quick to interrupt for those that don't know, who's Hal Leonard?
Hal Leonard is one of the largest publishers of jazz music in the world, and at this point in time, they also own sheetmusicplus.com, and a lot of music is available to be purchased there that it's put out by artists like us. So, for example, Hal Leonard now allows, for example, I could pick my favorite tune by Branford Marsalis, and as long as they own the rights to it, which they own a lot of rights to a lot of songs, I could then write my own arrangement for big band, for string quartet, for oboe, bassoon, and trombone, whatever I want, and I can publish it on their website and sell it. And of course, we're talking about different kinds of profit margins and all that than an original composition. But still, to be able to do that is not something you could do 20 years ago. When I was in junior high, which would have been the mid '80s, Hal Leonard would put out sort of a demo record of what were the charts coming out that year, so a band director could listen, and there was a little bit of narration often. This is a trombone feature, and it goes up to a high C for your lead trombone player, whatever the little bit was. And there was a chart on this one record. Somehow or another, my teacher was like, yeah, you can have this. I don't need it, whatever. And said I could have it and listen to it, and I became fascinated by this one arrangement of a great old tune called Undecided. Right? Like just a great kind of riff melody, but not a blues, right? And the recording was by Ashley Alexander, fabulous valve trombonist that not a lot of people knew about. Had a big band for a while, but his arranger was a guy named Frank Mantooth, and Frank Mantooth is a household name in the big band world for the most part. Also, as someone who teaches a lot, he's got a great book on jazz piano voicings for non-jazz piano players, how to get great sounds out of your chord structures for simple things, but have them sound elegant and modern and those sorts of things. I think he's also a guy who's put out a lot of books on, the right changes to tunes and reharmonization things and stuff like that. But again, I became fascinated by this tune and this arrangement. And I think I must have been in 8th grade because that summer I went to the Burton Music Camp, does that still exist, Burton Music Camp? I don't know. Yeah, there was a music camp here in the Northwest. There was always 3 weeks in the summer. It was 2 weeks of junior high and a week for high school students. And the recommendation was if you were going into high school to do the high school week. So I did the high school week. I ended up meeting dudes that I was going to be in my high school jazz band with at Garfield later. but I was in a little big band there, and I think at that point I had my grandfather's fake book. My grandfather was a piano player on the peninsula and had a couple of old fake books from the 40s and 50s, and Undecided was in there. So I brought my fake book because I knew I was going to be doing some jazz stuff, and I didn't know much. I barely knew my blues scale, I think. Some major scales, because I was a piano player. But the opportunity presented itself for me to write an arrangement of Undecided for this little, I think it was 2 or 3 trumpets, 2 trombones and some saxophones. But Randy Burgessson was the trumpet player in that band. I think he was going into his senior year in high school at that time. I can't remember who all else was in that band, but there were definitely some, and again, some guys I went to high school with, a trombone player named Tony Miles, and saxophonist Scott Adams, who's I think still around on the scene, playing with, I think he used to play with Spike and the Impalers a lot. So we played it, and it was corny, but I wrote out all the parts by hand, and I transposed all the parts, and it was like, I want to do this. I want to do more of this. What a joy to get to hear what you wrote played. Even if it was not good, the information that you got from that was light years, And I remember the trumpet player being like, "You're gonna be like Doc Severinsen one day, right?" That was the big deal, right? As a
Kicked out of the military? What does he mean by that?
Wearing flashy clothes. But it really connected with me, and so I didn't do it a lot in high school. I mean, I kind of dabbled. I did some arranging for my combo. Like I had a sextet. So I lifted like some Maceo Parker sextet stuff with Pee Wee Ellis and Fred Wesley. I bought some combo. I started buying charts too, so that I could look at scores and see how, real dudes did it. Definitely some transcribing. I think when you start transcribing solos and you realize that you can do that, you can make that transition to, transcribing the horn parts for Monin, or some kind of, quintet kind of sound, some Burton and Diz, or some Benny Golson and Curtis Fuller. I did a lot of those records, or the J.J. Johnson and Kai Winding, where it's 2 trombones, but it's real, split stereo, so it's real easy to write them out and figure them out, and then go, oh, that's why that sounds like they're playing in thirds, or that's in fourths, and that's why it sounds kind of different than all the other stuff that they played in the chart or whatever. So it all comes back to me to that like fascination with how music works, and realizing that if I learned better how to write it, and I could get more sounds onto paper, regardless of whether I was composing or arranging, I just had a bigger palette. My palette of paints would just be bigger. And I always felt like as a trombone player, my palette was pretty small. I mean, then I should go back and say then, when I was in my teens and 20s, I felt like well, it's the trombone. You're not going to put a bucket on it on your modern jazz record. You're not going to play with a plunger on your modern jazz record. That's reserved for when you're doing the Duke Ellington tributes and Al Gray moments and stuff like that. So I felt like having access to writing and bands to write for, which I always, I've always tried to have some kind of project to write for that was more than just me as a trombonist, whether it was my big band or the quintet or my septet, to just kind of explore different kinds of arranging and different colors and textures. Obviously, you can do more with a big band than you can with 4 horns than you can with 2 horns. So just getting to explore that. And then also going to the jazz workshop in Port Townsend and being around John Clayton and going to, at that time, Bud Shank was still running the workshop, and John was there. It might have been one of the first years he was there. And he did a daily arranging kind of summit thing. And, one day was all goal-setting workshop type stuff, but a lot of it was how to model what you're listening to and transcribe arrangements and say, okay, well, I really like, again, let's use Art Blakey's Monin as an example. I really like that. Let me write a song like that. Let's just use the same groove, and let's use the same form, and heck, why not even use the same harmony and just put our own melody on it and arrange it in the style and see if we can evoke the same thing, which as we'll talk about when we get to this class, having a goal for your composition is really helpful at the beginning, whether it's because whether it's a title, like just giving your song a title before you put pen to paper just gives context right away. I want it to be an Art Blakey shuffle, gives it context before you ever put a note down on the page. And so that sort of thing, coupled with writing a big band chart as a class, that was it, And then the records, that Ashley Alexander record. But I remember, must have been like probably my second or third year of college, that this and I loved Gil Evans. My brother and I grew up sharing a bedroom through high school, so we listened to the same records every night going to bed. We loved those Miles Davis, Porgy and Bess, and Miles Ahead and Sketches of Spain. But this Gil Evans record came out on CD for the first time, right? Those days too, that had never been out in the modern era, and it was on Pacific Jazz, called Old Bottle, New Wine, and it was just jazz classics, Strutting with Some Barbecue, King Porter Stomp, I think In a Mist, Bix Beiderbecke is on there, a Jelly Roll Morton tune, but it's featuring Cannonball Adderley, and it's the Gil Evans Orchestra. And it's it's less orchestral than those Miles records, right? Those Miles records have bass clarinets and flutes and all kinds of, very orchestral sounding stuff. The Gil Evans Orchestra on those records is 3 trumpets. I think it's 3 trumpets, 3 trombones, tuba, and reeds in rhythm section with guitar. And it's so killing. It is so, so, so killing. And Cannonball is in the same way, is just, featured soloist on everything. Go find this record, people. Go listen to this record. I can't do it justice by telling you about it. But it is, I remember the King Porter Stomp starts out with these, just chords. Boom, ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba, Cannonball blowing over the top of the chords. Boom, and then and they just get into just hard swinging, no melody, Cannonball blowing, right with little stabby backgrounds, how Gil would like to do. It just went, and in the same way that JJ and Stan Getz at the Opera House was like, oh, I want to do that with the trombone. That record was the record that really made me go, I want to do that. I want a tuba in my big band, which I did. I did with Nelson, and the sounds of that band, to me, that record, that's it. That is the be all end all for me. And as much as I love so much more other broad versions of big bands, whether it's Maria Schneider or more traditional big bands, that particular iteration of Gil's band is like, that's all I ever have tried to evoke in a lot of ways. The energy and the spirit and the combo-ness of it being, fleet-footed and being able to just sound like a big combo, but also just give you that giantness that a big band can really do. That's which is what we you love playing in big bands too. It gives you that spirit when everybody's playing in the shout choruses and stuff, where you kind of just you want to stand up and be in the moment of the tune. It's so much energy around you, especially where I get to sit, which is normally in the big band. The drummer's right here next to me. I'm feeling all of his energy. It's my favorite place, So yeah, that's a long bunch of stories to kind of get you to how did I get into arranging, but it's all of those things. I don't think without the ingredients of all of those pieces that I really get serious about it, that I start studying it and buying books and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I'm curious because I know you played. You say you play piano. I've heard other people say, "Yeah, Dave plays great piano." So that was prior to the trombone, correct? I wonder that must have had some sort of impact, just as a because you can see all that stuff with your hands and how things kind of move and work and fit together. So I'm assuming maybe some of the desire to be an arranger stemmed out of the piano a little bit. Is that a fair assessment? Or?
Oh yeah, I mean, and it's hard to see, but my hands aren't real big. I don't have typical piano player sized hands. And about the time I started playing piano was when I was 7, My grandmother was a great classical pianist. My grandfather was a great jazz pianist. My grandmother studied with Franz Liszt's protege in New York. Like, she was very serious at a young age. And ended up being, got her master's at the University of Washington and became a music teacher out on the peninsula and taught hundreds and hundreds of students over many years. But she was my first piano teacher, and some of the very first things that she taught me, the idea of, like, pretending that there's a small orange under your hand, when that's the proper hand technique. It's not this, it's like there's almost like your hand is just balanced over the top of that thing. Oh man, every time I go to sit at the piano, that clicks into my head. But about the time I was getting into jazz, I was, Oscar Peterson, Art Tatum, those are the people that my dad was listening to and that I was just enamored with. And I realized very quickly my hands couldn't do those things. Like, I would never get to do walking tenths. I would never get to do a lot of things physically just because of my reach. And I could fake them, and, as someone who also plays piano, there's ways around these things. But I just kind of knew it wasn't going to be the thing. But I loved the idea that, my grandparents had those Reader's Digest songbooks of, pop hits and hits of the swing era and that kind of stuff. And I loved the idea that you could go from a fake book to that. Like, that's what somebody did. Somebody out there in the world was getting paid to take a melody and chord symbols and make a piano arrangement for this book. And I was fascinated by that. Like, that's not the song. That's just a version of the song. And I think a lot of times we forget that. I think high school students, are you playing the original version of the song? Or are you playing a watered down version for high school level students? They're not the same thing in some cases. They may have the same intention in the music. They may have the same sense of spirit, but they aren't the same thing. And so know what it is that you're actually working on and practicing when you're working on these things. But the pianistic part of my jazz, I studied piano with Dave Peck for a year, which taught me everything I know about theory, really, truly. I mean, I learned more from 8 months of theory lessons with Dave Peck than, most of my undergraduate studies. I didn't, you know how that is too. Like, jazz.
I studied with Dave also, and yes, that's a lot. That's a lot of info.
Jazz theory really, if you have a good handle on jazz theory as a high school student, going to college and doing the theory at, a major university is pretty easy. Like, you're way past the 4-5-1 kind of stuff, right? You're like, I can do this in my sleep. So that was a great preparation, and that also allowed me to kind of be more prepared to arrange in college when I could actually learn it, when I could take an orchestration class and an arranging class, I studied composition with Bill Smith, and we did a lot of 12-tone arranging, which I didn't know. I'd never heard of such a, I didn't know there was a technique that you could use to do this way. And so that also opened up, doorways in how things sound. And, you listen to, you hear a recording of an arrangement and you go, well, now that's different. And it sticks with you. Archie Shepp's version of The Girl from Ipanema. If you've never heard it, prepare to have your ears cleaned out. It is awesome in so many ways. And yet, if you're like a diehard purist and you love the Stan Getz and you're, a fairly conservative jazz listener, this will offend you in every way. And that is that to me, that's the heart of what jazz music is to me. It's subversive. It challenges your ability to listen. If it's too safe to listen to, then it ain't really the real deal. It's easy listening, and that has never been what jazz has meant to be, right? And so whether that's through your arrangement or through a composition or through the energy you bring in the band, that's the thing that comes back to the core. And that's why, again, circling back to composing and arranging, I'm very goal-oriented with a lot of this stuff. Like, I'm working on a project for you right now. String chord, a bunch of projects. But I'm working on a specific project that this minute, this week, for string quartet and jazz quartet. And the arrangements need to function just as well, without you being a part of what's happening. We've talked about this a lot, that I don't want the string players to be bored. They're not there for window dressing. This is an accomplished group of musicians in their own right, and they deserve to be featured on this concert in the same way that the jazz group will be featured, even though they're not going to be improvising, even though they're not going to play 3-minute solos, right? So how do we accommodate for that in the arrangement? And again, I'm not composing any of this. These are your compositions. So again, I also have a goal. I have to serve your composition. Like, what does your recording of it sound like? What is your vibe when you play it? Not what do I think it should be, but what is it to you already? And how do I write things to help complement that? So it's all the same kinds of jobs we have, I think, as musicians, whether we're sidemen or whether we're a for-hire arranger, orchestrator, whatever that is. It's still to serve the leader's viewpoint, their direction, their whatever about the music. And certainly for me, being able to go over to the piano to figure things out when I'm trying to explain something to either my own band or whether I'm trying to work in a teaching situation where I can say to a student, yeah, you're playing the right notes, but doesn't this voicing sound better? Doesn't this fit your hands better? Those things I think are huge and probably have helped me more. The piano skills have helped me more in the teaching and arranging side, certainly, than with playing that stupid instrument. There's no relation between the trombone and the piano. So other than the way you read the music. And so, of course, that also was really helpful. I was a great sight reader on my trombone pretty quickly because all I did was sight read every day at the piano, those Reader Digest books.
Well, I want to go back also to, you mentioned, being able to study arranging with John Clayton very early on, which I think is huge. I remember, I was up at Centrum, I believe it was still the Bud Shank Jazz Festival. This would have been like 97, 98, 98, 99,
yeah, right
somewhere.
around the time we kind of became, it's like when my career started.
Yeah. So that was when I went up there, and I don't recall they had or that they offered an arranging class, and I think that'd be cool if they did have it. I'm curious why they don't have it any longer.
It kind of comes and goes. There was they had a special year maybe 5 or 6 years ago where Bill Holman was there the whole week and did a special arranging track. Like, you could come and do the workshop as a non-player, which I don't think they'd ever done. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's correct. And there have been other people that have been, in varying degrees depending on who the big band directors are. So one year, I think Phil Kelly was on the faculty and ran one of the big bands, and he did do arranging stuff. John has done it from time to time in over my life as a musician at this point. And I'm trying to think who else might have done. I think Maria has probably been up there at least once and done some kind of, at very least one day workshop session, whatever, at the workshop, if not more. And also, the advent of like publications of these things. When we were in high school, nobody played Duke Ellington's.
There was also no internet.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's that too. I mean, I think there's that too. You had to really want to seek out records. You had to, I used to go to Bud's Jazz Records and like crawl around on the floor to look at the records underneath the racks and just, or my local record store on Queen Anne. Like, it was, you had to really want to find it. And also to know about records was hard, like just to become aware. There was no master list of every Blue Note record online like there is now, where you can just go, oh, on December 17th, 1958, this is the session, and here's every dude and every take, and like that's all free information for you now. In 1995, you had to go to a library, probably a music library, and look at a $100 book to get that information. So now the fact that you can just go, oh, I want to listen to whatever, anytime you want is amazing to me. I mean, I think that's, you and I have talked about this too. I think that's where I'm kind of stunned that there aren't more musicians that are young and more knowledgeable about the music than I was at that age. You know, like there's no reason why you shouldn't know 100 times more music than I did at 17 or whatever. There's no money holding you back. You know, you don't have to go buy the music anymore, which is, you know, sad but also amazing. and you can listen to it over and over and over and over again wherever you are because of your phone. You don't have to carry a Walkman with you like I did to school, and you didn't have to dub your records onto cassette tapes so that you could take it to school and listen to it on your Walkman. Like there's no barrier to access to anybody to learn as much as there is to learn through listening, which I think that's the majority of how you learn stuff, by listening. And then go try to play it, or go write it down. You know, if it's an arranging thing, if it's a compositional thing. You know, one of the things we do in these concerts, and you've done many times in these concerts, we play contrafacts, which is just a fancy word for new melody, old changes. You know, and the act of doing that connects you with the tune that you're basing it on, right? You now have, but you also are tapping into your musical voice in that context. So you're learning how to play the tune that you're basing it on better, and you're finding your personal voice as a musician better. Why wouldn't you do that? Why don't you do that every day of your musical life in some way? Bill Smith used to carry around a little pocket notebook with music paper, and he would just walk around the UW campus, and he'd just write little 4-bar phrases, 8-bar phrases, 12-tone rows, whatever he was just contemplating for the day while he was out walking. And then those things would get developed later on, or maybe they never get developed. But at least he's honing in. You know, it's like snowballs need one extra snowflake every day to get bigger. So all you got to do is add one extra snowflake.
I remember, it's this excellent point. I tell this story a lot to different students that are asking about composing. And I remember when I was in college, I was studying at Cornish College of the Arts in Seattle, and they brought in Joanne Brackeen to do a workshop.
Yeah, amazing composer.
Yeah, tremendous. And she was talking about people that were known as famous composers, and the examples she used, it was like Duke Ellington or Charles Mingus or Wayne Shorter or Joni Mitchell, whomever, you know. And she said that they were writing every single day, you know, over the course of their life, you know, thousands upon thousands of tunes. Maybe 20 or 30 of them became famous, but they were always writing, you know, and that to me was like a light bulb. It was like, oh, of course, that makes complete sense, you know.
Yeah.
So just getting in the practice of doing that. And then another example that she used, she was saying, you just take a tune, take any type of tune, you know, play it in 4/4, play it the normal way, the original, play it in 4/4, play it in 3/4, play it in 5/4, play it in 6, play it in 7, play it like a swing tune, play it like a bossa nova or a funk tune. You know, take something that you know, and then you're playing with that, and that in and of itself is composing and arranging of a sort, you know.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
We're going to get into all this in the series anyway.
If you were a producer for a record, right, and you were being asked to do, you know, a cover version of something, but in the style of blah blah, fill in the blank, it's still you're still serving that, you know. This will be part of a very planned kind of instructional series, if you will, that we do moving forward, and I'm really excited about this too, because I do a lot of workshop teaching in the summertime, as I'm sure you do. But it's always hard to kind of encapsulate something that you can work on over time, because you're in the summertime in a week-long workshop where you get kids or whatever for an hour every day for a week, you're really just trying to give them as much information as possible, because you know they can't absorb it all that week. But then they can at least go back to their schools and marinate on that over the course of the year, right? At least that's how I always felt like I experienced those summer workshops. I just always felt overwhelmed, but I got a few nuggets during the week, and then those things would last me most of the year until I went back to the workshop the next summer and was like, okay, I'm a little further ahead than I was a year ago. But I think when it comes to arranging, because it's so personal, composing and arranging, it's so personal, it's better to do it in the way that we're going to do it, where it's like, hey, we're going to give you an hour's worth of content, and now go spend a month just working on that 1 hour idea. And write ideas, and you know, one of the first things we're gonna, you know, one of the first things that I always do when I talk about composition is the 3 seeds, where you just go, okay, it's still a blank canvas, but I'm gonna pick a specific thing to be the seed. It's either gonna be a melody, right, or it's gonna be a harmony, or it's gonna be a rhythm, and then maybe if you wanted to say a fourth, you could say form, but that's less deep, but once that is chosen, and once you commit to that thing, well, everything else you have fewer and fewer choices for everything else, right? So that's something that you can now, if you were learning it in the course of a week-long workshop, you would get to the end of the day, you're exhausted, you go home, you go to bed. You don't go sit and write 4 or 5 little seed ideas based on that thing. Well, when our little series starts up, you'll have a month, and you can do 1 a week, you could do 1 a day, and then you can start to filter out the things that aren't so great, and go, but that idea is really good. Let me develop that idea, because as you'll see, you know, I brought 2 tunes that for today for us to play, and they were written in about 30 minutes. So. And one of them's pretty good, and one of them's sounds like it was written in 30 minutes.
It's a functional tune.
Yeah. Which, again, isn't uncommon. I mean, that's how those guys did it in the Blue Note era, man. They were, you know, scribbling stuff out that day. And I think that's also, you know, we talked about things that really got me into composing and arranging, and being a copyist is something, you know, we've talked a lot about, that I kind of do, not really on the side. I mean, I definitely, you know, put it out there that this is something that I do, and that I am for hire to do this, et cetera, but I'm not really trying to just do it for anybody. And so I got really lucky to get some amazing clients, you know, in my 20s, in Kenny Garrett and Dave Liebman and Jeff Tain Watts and Kenny Kirkland, to get to look at their handwritten charts of tunes that I had listened to hundreds and if not thousands of times, and to see how their idea, you know, went onto paper. There's nothing wrong with transcribing all this stuff, and there's real value in trying to do that, but you don't get the answer of what they were thinking. You're hoping you got the answer, and you certainly are representing the sound of what's on the record in proper musical notation if it sounds right. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's the way they thought of it. And, you know, with someone like Kenny Garrett, wrote out all his piano voicings, like for everything. He was like, I want this voicing. I want it like this. Kenny Garrett, also an insanely great piano player. I don't think very many people have probably ever heard him play piano, but he can really play some piano. He could play a gig with pretty much anybody you can imagine on piano and sound killer. Some people are just, you know, it's just lead sheets and changes, and even the changes are not very descriptive. I think that's also like something really interesting to me. Do people write, you know, is it B flat 7? Is it B flat 9? Is it B flat 6? Is it, you know, what do they write when they're doing a B flat blues and it's just a normal B flat blues, but what do they put in the first measure? How do they conceive that? That one little thing. You could write a doctoral dissertation on how people, you know, think of the first chord of a blues, and how it's reflected in what people have written down, right? I had the pleasure of going to the Smithsonian and going to the Duke Ellington archives and putting my hands, with gloves, of course, but putting my hands on piles of actual Duke Ellington charts, scores, handwritten by him, handwritten by Billy Strayhorn, and they were just knocked out. I mean, talk about knocking out charts. The bass line for one of the blues, which is not what's on the record, by the way, it just says G, 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 C, C, like just quarter notes written out, no changes, just that's what it's written out. That's not what they play on the record. It's very interesting. How things get translated from the way that it's written to the way that it gets played, especially in a band like that where there's new stuff every day, every week. Stuff getting written on the bus, in the train, in the bathroom, in the restaurants, wherever. But I think that as we move into like the more modern era where people now have computers and almost anybody can make a pretty good looking chart, all the information is out there for you to convert an idea into something you can put in front of another musician and have them play it the way you expected it to be played. And certainly the knowledge is out there if you want to learn how to properly notate music, and you're a young music student, you probably already do. It's a few little conventions that you probably want to pick up on, but there's not a lot to it. And I do recommend learning how to do it by hand at least once. I mean, I remember being in college and having to write my first big band chart and doing it all by hand. Like, just even though I knew finale and I was into that, I was like, I'm gonna do it by hand. And it took me more time to write out those parts than it did to write the arrangement on the score paper. So I learned my lesson. I'll never do it again, but I 100% am glad I did, because you know what it's supposed to look like. You have a sense of it now. You're not just letting the computer decide what it's supposed to look like, that's the unfortunate thing, right? What a lot of people do, they just put it in and go, okay, that's good, that's right. No, that's why there are people called copyists and music editors, because they will take the extra steps to make sure it is absolutely right. They won't trust the computer. They will go back and go, no, that actually, there's a better way to make that look if I split these beams or if I whatever. Right. So that part of the music has always fascinated me too. Like the notational thing, it's there to present a picture of the sound at the end of the day. And if the picture doesn't reflect the sound, then it's not going to help us play the sound better. Right. So I always try to figure out how to write what I'm writing in a way that feels like it sounds, that looks like it sounds, which I think is always a great tool for young arrangers. If it looks like it's high, it probably is, right? For the instrument that you're writing for. If it looks like it's low, it probably is. It's super simple. But it's very true, And I think our instruments in particular have the trickiest part of that, because we play generally in the higher registers of where you might think, if you were to look at it on paper, like lots of lead trombone parts have lots of ledger lines for the bass clef. You play generally, up in here on your saxophone in terms of the notation, in terms of the treble clef, not down in the where middle C would look. You can, but yeah, exactly. So I think where our instruments live is the trickiest of that. But when it comes to like trumpets and altos, and it's pretty obvious. It looks like it sounds, and that's such a valuable thing to just always keep in mind. And it's the same with looking at Gil Evans scores or Count Basie charts. There's an inherent like visualness to following what you're hearing when you look at it. You don't have to be able to even read the notation to be able to see that, the saxophones are going here, and now it's real busy, and there's lots of notes, and it's very dense, and I can hear all that in the double time part of the sax solo or whatever, right? And so, that's a part of why I love being a copyist. I want to look good. I want there to be no mistake in the interpretation of what I wrote. And if I want to leave it open for interpretation, then I can do that too. But I have the ability to be as specific about what I want the musician to do as possible, if I take the care to do that. And again, that's not necessarily what I want every time. If we're gonna play later, like I certainly have not. I'm not telling you anything other than here's the melody of the song. Make your decisions from there, right? It's the same, and you're going to be doing the same for me. So, I'm fascinated about how arranging can allow you to do varying degrees of that.
Well, we're getting to the time of that interview where we'll open things up for questions. Are there any questions so far online? No. If there are any questions, just put them in the comments, and we will get to them as best we can with time allowed. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep barraging Dave with questions here. So, can you talk about, now you've been writing for your band, there's the Triskaidekaband.
Triskaidekaband.
How long has that band been in existence now?
Well, yeah, and it's not necessarily even, I mean, I don't even know if it's in existence anymore, to be honest. Like, we had our last gig right when Tula's closed, and we haven't really done anything since then, and that was right before the COVID started. So I don't know if I'm even going to start it back up again, to be honest. There's a part of me that's sort of like, it had its life of whatever, 8 or 9 years we did that, and every month. And it was super fun, and it was what it was. But it was also always going to be somewhat limited because we never had a rehearsal, in all that time. One or two rehearsals for a couple special concerts, and that's about it. And that's also sort of the nature of what doing big bands in Seattle has become, unfortunately. It's either a band that you've played in for years, like the Emerald City Jazz Orchestra, Jazz Please, or these long-running big bands. Seattle Repertory Jazz Orchestra did, a bunch of these bands for 20 years. But they're also, there's limiting factors to a lot of these things because of a variety of things. But I think at the end of the day, it has to do with, people who really are caring about moving big bands forward and not just holding on to what has happened in the past. I think that's a big part of it. A lot of these bands, nobody's writing any new music. It's all, it's all stuff you can go buy or could go buy. And then the flip side is there's not that many rooms for big bands anymore. I mean, unless you want to go play in a sports bar or someplace like that, it's tough. And not to mention the economics of having a big band. I mean, thankfully, I was able to pay my band, $40, $50, $60 on every guy in the band. But that's 13 dudes, and that means, that's still not that much money. So it becomes tough to Duke Ellington had these problems. He basically furloughed his band, a couple of times.
I'm sure, I know you've talked probably to Julian Priester about this. He talks about this, firsthand about the monetary reality of being in a big band. And, everyone always talks about, Quincy Jones. Quincy Jones, well, from what I understand, when he took his band to Europe, he lost a ton of money. A lot of these guys lost money touring.
He got stranded in Europe. Him and his band got stranded. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, that's what convinced Floyd Standifer to move back to Seattle. He was on that tour and was part of that band, and what happens after that? He moves back to Seattle,
which is great for Seattle.
Oh, yeah, for sure,
but
sure.
I guess
Buddy Catlett stays.
Yeah,
right? I mean, I think that's the Patty Bones stays. It's a real interesting, scenario.
But this is the stuff they don't talk to you guys. They don't tell the general public about. All you see is like the great side of being a musician in these icons. You don't hear about all the crappy times, and that's a big part of it for all of us playing.
And he bit off a lot. It was like a musical, the show that he was doing that he took to Europe, and then kind of used that to springboard and develop his big band as well. It's already tough to make money as a musician playing jazz music in a trio or quartet, right? Even a regular gig, like playing at Vito's on a regular basis, or used to be playing Tula's on a regular basis, or the Royal Room on a regular basis. I play on it's not happening so much now, but the Royal Room Creative Music Ensemble is kind of like it's a more improvising kind of big band. And it's fabulous. I love it. I have a great time playing in it. But it's like, man, we are sandwiched up there, and we're not making much money, and we're doing it because we love playing in big bands, and we love the band leader that's running that band and the music that he's providing. And I think at the end of the day, those are the things that really drive a big band. As the band leader of my own big band, I don't know if I have the drive to do that anymore with that band, with that book. I would love to get a record out of that band, to just sort of have it be documented. I wrote 50 or 60 arrangements for that band over that time, and a lot of that will never get heard again, probably. Some of them have been exploded out for normal size big band, and have been sold and played by other groups and high school groups and things like that. But I haven't made a huge effort to do that, mainly because I haven't decided what I wanted to do to kind of put a cap on the life of Triskaidekaband, right? So the upshot of that is I think I'm going to start something new. And I'm not sure if I want it to be bigger or smaller. I think smaller. I think I'm going to do something that's like a 9-piece band. I think I need it to be a full rhythm section, piano, bass, and drums. I'm still debating on that because like Slide Hampton's Octet, one of the great bands of the 60s, was 2 trumpets, 2 trombones, tenor, bari, bass, and drums. And it sounds like a big band at times, and it also feels and sounds like a combo at times. It's great. Orrin Evans is Captain Black big band. Similar size group. It's basically a nonet. All that works for me, but I'm still missing. I'm missing tuba. I really like the sound of tuba as sort of like a rounding instrument. So maybe I need to do some sort of sacrificing. Maybe I need to do 2 trumpets, trombone, and tuba, and 2 reeds. Maybe I need to do 1 reed and get, maybe it's tenor or bari, so that it's all kind of pushing towards the low end with the trumpets being lead. I haven't decided. I really haven't. I've been thinking about this a lot because I feel like I need a new outlet for larger horn writing, and I don't want to just sit and write big band charts, even though I do that. I don't want to write them with no outlet. And so this, like, for example, I'm writing some stuff for you, have written some stuff that got performed by the Federal Way Symphony, and that was fabulous and super fun. And even though they got played and performed that one time, that music will continue to have a life because it's in print, and it will get played by more and more people. So
To be fair, it was like 2019, November 2019, we did the
forgot
concert.
about
It was
that.
like, ugh,
Yeah.
So, to be continued very soon, hopefully.
Yeah.
Before we move on, any questions in the comments? No? Okay. All right. Well, I'm curious, with you doing all the copy work for other people and arrangements for, high-profile clients, running your own many different size bands for years, big bands, septet, small groups. Where do you see? I mean, I guess if you were going to start a new project, and putting economics as part of that project, not just playing for the love of music. Obviously, we want to do that too, but hopefully we can make a living or make some income from playing. Do you see there being places to play for larger ensembles and money to be made, or does that have to be like funded by a grant or sponsorship, or how do you see it from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that yes, I think the answer is yes. I think the economics of big bands are very tricky today because it's hard to charge a lot of money to hear music. A lot of places don't charge money to hear music that we might potentially play. So that makes it tough. So that means that the club has a amount, whatever their magic number is for your band, regardless of whether there's 3 people or 50 people. There's a magic number that they're like, this is what we can pay you because nobody's paying to walk in the door or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Or it comes down to we're going to give you a slice of booze sales or, those sorts of things. Well, now it's really incumbent on you to do a whole heck of a lot more than just be a band leader and play the music really good. You've got to get seats in. You got people in the seats. You got to make them drink. Okay, well, is some heady big band stuff going to do all of those things? No, probably not. Probably not. It might even like not be good for the clients of the in that particular club. Like the jazz music is a distraction to them watching the game and having a beer. So. But the flip side of that, as you said, is that there is funding options. I think, whether it's grants, I think that's a great option. I know a number of people have explored that in the big band world. Wayne Horvitz certainly has funded some of the things that band has done through grants. But I think there's other money to be had. We did some things with Triskaidekaband at Tula's that I thought, if Tula's had been able to continue, we could have really parlayed into something interesting, and that was having liquor companies sponsor nights. We did a concert of, I transcribed all of Chick Corea's The Leprechaun, one of his great records, and arranged it for Triskaidekaband, which is not what the orchestration is on the record. And we played the whole album, and it was sponsored by guess what? Irish Whiskey Company. We had one on the books for Hendrick's Gin. One with tasting with Lefroy. Like there were a lot of things that were irons in the fire that when they decided to close and COVID struck, then it was like, well, nothing is happening and no money's getting spent on this stuff. But at least in my experience and conversations with liquor distributors, there's large budgets to be had for promotion of their thing. I remember playing a gig years ago, the night before Thanksgiving, and it was Wild Turkey. Every year, Wild Turkey, the night before Thanksgiving is Turkey Night. They give out T-shirts and they got foam turkeys that they give out in bars and stuff like that. Why couldn't a jazz club, why couldn't the place you play on the regular get in contact with their liquor distributor, set that up to have money put in on the night that now beefs up what the club is willing to put in for the night, and now you have a wage for your band that's fair. And because it's a special event, it makes sense to have a bigger group. Like everything now now instead of it just being a quartet, it's a really cool big group special thing that maybe doesn't happen all the time, and now you have a really good reason to promote it, that it's only going to happen this one night a year, rather than your regular big band gig once a month, and one of them just happens to be sponsored. Well, no one's going to care about that. But you don't play any gigs for 6 months, and then you play this one gig, and it's a big deal. Well, you can promote that, and now people want to come because they're like, I haven't seen these guys in forever or whatever, right?
Well, you mentioned earlier about seeds for tunes. Well, you've already got the title, The Night Before Thanksgiving.
Yes.
It could be like a horror movie or whatever. What did you got? The Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yes.
Right
yeah,
on.
I mean, titles and seed are I think that, that for me gets my focus going, especially with tunes. Like, man, if I can get the right title, everything kind of goes, oh, does it feel like those words? Does it sound like that's what it means? Like, well, no, it doesn't. It doesn't, it doesn't. Like, I brought a tune today that we'll play. Talked about this comedian that I've had the pleasure of getting to know, Ron Funches. He has a podcast called Getting Better. And it's, it's a sort of self-help, mental health kind of discussion with fellow comedians and other people that he knows. And so one of the tunes I wrote, I titled Getting Better, because I was like, it's a contrafact on Beatrice. We'll see if it feels like getting better. I wanted to make it feel uplifting, but I also wanted it to feel like something that's settling at the same time. I feel like that's a place where maybe a lot of people are in right now. Like, at least they hope they're getting better as all these COVID restrictions are ending and life is slightly more normal for some of us. I hope I'm getting better. Like, I'm trying to get better. I think I want to get better. Yeah. So we'll see if the tune makes me feel like that, or if I just feel less, just as confused as I felt 6 months ago about life.
That's a tough thing for me too, because sometimes I'll every week I'm trying to write this new music and I'll come up with something and maybe it's like, okay, well, I've got this chord progression. I like this progression. I need to write something. I'll write a melody, and then I'm stuck. Like, what do I call this? What does this sound like? I mean, and just coming up with something that's not just a throwaway title, which there are many.
Yes.
So
that's harder for me, to write a tune with no title and then to give it a title. The only way I can do that is if I have some other goal in mind with the tune. Like, especially when we were doing the quintet I had with my brother and I was always really specific. I was like, I want a tune like this. I need a tune that we need a tune that functions this way. In the pocket, deep swinger, Blakey, blues drenched, whatever words you want to use, right? We need a tune that serves this function. So then I would write it, and then I could give it a title because I knew what I was trying to evoke, right? And the notes just were helping to do that. The feeling that I started with, that I wanted to make the notes evoke, is still the same feeling at the beginning. So I could just go back to I'm feeling these things. The title needs to reflect that. It doesn't need to reflect the notes anymore. It just needs to reflect the feeling. Because when I tell it to the audience, then they get the feeling. And I haven't heard a note yet, right? So now I don't have to, now it's not hard. But it is very hard for me to do, like you were saying, to just write some stuff with no particular sense of direct, no sense of reason or rhyme to why I'm doing it, and then make it into something that's very concrete. Well, it didn't start with the intention of ever being something concrete. So, of course, that's going to be hard, right? But when you start out composing with, I'm going to make whatever definition you're giving that thing, a bluesy ballad, a light bossa, a Coltrane-ish tune.
Those
right?
are all titles. Great titles right there.
No. Those are the titles of really bad big band charts for middle school kids. Right? I mean, you've seen those, right?
Well, yes.
Kinda bassy.
Yeah, there's one I can't remember. Something about it, like a taco, something taco. Actually, it was a horrible title. It was like the puffy taco. It's like, why would you
give me a break,
Yeah.
please?
Yeah.
You know.
And any questions before I monopolize all the time here? Are we okay? And remember, I mean, if you watch this after the fact and you have a question, you can always put it in the comments and we'll get to them. So, all right, cool. Well, you mentioned the quintet with your brother Thomas Marriott, who many people know, I'm sure. So for that band, did you do the majority of the arranging, or was it like split 50-50, or
More, it started to become, it started to get where Tom started writing like after our first record. I don't think he had any tunes on our first record. And then he started, then I think we did my septet record, and then we did the second Marriott Brothers record, and that he had a couple of tunes on there. But yeah, the first record, it was pretty much either hard bop classics that were rare. We wanted to find like obscure hard bop stuff. So we did Booker Ervin tunes, we did Kenny Drew, we did, we wanted to play stuff that no one else was playing. We just wanted to make sure that if we were going to play anything old and classic, that it wasn't something that anybody else was doing. So Society Red was our theme song, like great tune. Like there's so many great Blue Note tunes that people don't play. And I think that's the other thing. Like nowadays, you got 18 fake books from Chuck Schur with all those tunes in them. In those days there weren't. You were transcribing, and if you wanted to play Wynton Marsalis's Delphio's Dilemma, you just hope you transcribed it correctly. And then the other half was original music. And that's sort of how we built the sets and built the records. It was sort of like, okay, well, what are the tentpole classics that we're going to do? And then what's missing? If those are the 5 tunes we've got, we need 10. Okay, well, we need a burner. We need like a big burn. We need a rhythm, or we need a fast blues or some kind of burnout vibe. We don't have anything that's Latin-y. Okay, well, whatever it was that we needed, that's where I would come in and start writing something. And most of the time, it was always with the title to start. It was like, I want to write, I think one of the first ones was the Ballad of Jack Torrance. It was dedicated to I was like, I love The Shining, and I wanted something that was just like, just like intense and scary and, all that kind of stuff. And then I remember for the second record, our bassist, Jeff Harper, I can't remember what the circumstances were, but I was at his house. He was asleep because he lived with some other musicians, right? It was the second famous house. It was Dan Heck and his not yet wife, Rebecca, lived there, and Jeff lived there. And I think we were playing video games, Dan and I, and Jeff was passed out and woke up, and he came in the other room and he said, I was just engaged in some schizophrenic warfare. And I just thought, what a great phrase. Like, wow, what does that mean? Let me contemplate. So there was a tune on the second record called Schizophrenic Warfare. I was like, Jeff, you have to write that song. And if you don't, then you're forcing me to have to do it. So I ended up having to do it. But those are the songs I think that at the end of the day are always the most successful, because I knew what I wanted it to. I knew what I wanted the listener to feel. And that clarity is so helpful, I think. We spit out a lot of music for whatever reason that doesn't really have a lot of intention. Whether it's to fill a gig, it's like, okay, I got a gig tomorrow and I want to write something new. Let me write something. That's a function, right? But that has nothing to do with the emotion of the music and the feeling and what you want your audience and your listener to feel. And I felt like, especially with that first record, we were very specific about, like, we want the audience to feel like this. when they listen to us. We want to be this, and we want to sound like this, and we want them to feel this. Those were real clear things right out of the gate for Tom and I. And we talked. There were things we talked about. You know, we had a logo made, and we talked with a designer, and we said these are the things that we want the logo to evoke. You know, like and that was super helpful because it also helped clarify it for us. Yeah. You know, give us a sense of direction. And when that direction wasn't, you know, when people in the band weren't driving with that direction, we made changes in the personnel, or we made changes in the music, or whatever was necessary. And that was a band that kind of had. I always felt like the Marriott Jazz Quintet had 3 kind of iterations. We had a version with Ruel Lubag and Jeff Cook and Tim Turner. That was kind of the first version. We made our demo record with that, and that helped us kind of parlay that into some bigger gigs. And then it became Wicks and Doria and Jeff Harper. And that was the first record, and then it morphed into, for the second record, with Weekon and John Hanson. And it really was like a couple years of each of those versions of the band, and they were real different. The very first one was like real hard boppy. Like, you know, Ruel and Tim Turner, like those guys were deep into that stuff. We played Brooker Irvin Scoochie and Kenny Drew's, what the heck is that? It's like a D minor. I can't remember what the heck it's called. Anyway, there are lots of that kind of stuff, like, you know, hip insider blue notey stuff. And then it started to become like, well, let's play some Terrence Blanchard. Let's play some Winton tunes. Let's play Delphio's Dilemma or something like that. And then more original music started to kind of fill in and try to complement those sounds. And then by the end, it was like we just were writing everything. I mean, there's not a lot of you know, classic jazz tunes on that second record that we did. Yet but it's back to that. But it feels like it. The tunes feel like a hard bop stuff. It's not real adventurous, but adventurous enough. You know, so.
Well, it's about that time. We need to start wrapping up. So we're going to take a brief pause here, get the lines set up, the sound check, and look at some tunes hastily, start the performance. David, it's been a pleasure having you here.
Man.
For all of our viewers here, so we're going to be starting this series next month. I don't have my calendar in front of me, but we'll be starting the first one. So if you're interested in being a part of these classes, it's not something you have to sign up for. Or register for. You just click on the link and start watching them, and be prepared with questions if you'd like to learn how to arrange. And it could be something just for, you know, duo, trio, quartet, quintet, whatever it is, any instrumentation. If you want to learn how to write or arrange, that's what this is for. Free and open to the public. We certainly would like to thank our sponsors, KNKX and Ted Brown Music and Tacoma Creates, for making this stuff possible. If you find value in these interviews and performances and you want to support our work, feel free to make a donation. You can do that online via Venmo or PayPal, and there's information about that at the beginning of this post. You can also mail a check as well. And yeah, so it's been a pleasure. Hope to see you again soon, and we'll be right back. Thanks so much.